Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dax.dev. Today, I don't know what time is it where you are. Here it's tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk with Scott Rigby, and he's going to tell us all about Helm. So I'm going to let Scott introduce himself. Hello, Scott. You're on the screen now. And welcome to another episode of Dax.dev.
Sure, yeah, I'm Scott Rigby.
Today, I don't know what time is it.
Probably most relevant to the talk is I'm part of the Helm team. I primarily focus on Helm charts, the official charts repo, and tooling and automation around Helm charts. That's not part of the scope of the Helm binary. I'm also part of the Helm governance team, or the Helm org team. So thanks for having me. Another thing I should mention is where I work. I work at Weaveworks now as of very recently. Mainly just because I wanted to really get into GitOps and seemed like a good team to be on. And I live in Brooklyn with my family and adopted animals. I'm super happy about it.
I have a question. What is your actual title at Weaveworks? Because Twitter says DX, but I'm not sure.
It's true. It's true.
So your title is just DX?
Yeah, I mean, it's in short, yes.
Okay, cool.
The title is officially developer experience.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, no, because I was thinking back to when we first met, and it was a coincidence because, so we met at KubeCon in Barcelona a year and a half ago, something like that. Yeah. And it's interesting because in Kubernetes, it's usually tons and tons and tons of people who are into like the ops side of things. Production, performance, all that kind of stuff. But there's very few people who are actually into developer experience. And I was one, and then you were in the same group of friends, and another person was in the same group of friends, and we were all working, doing the same thing. And it feels like it was like this huge coincidence.
It really was, yeah. It was a very great meeting. I want to say meeting of minds, but just meeting in general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull out our agenda here. I don't know where I put the file because we have tons of stuff to discuss actually.
Yes.
So you wanted to share some announcements first. So you told me about a migration workshop that happened yesterday.
That's right. Yeah. So the Helm team, other members of the Helm team, not really myself. I didn't do anything for this one. Other heroes did on the team, held a migration workshop for people to help users move from Helm 2 to Helm 3. And this is not new news that this was a thing that should be done, or that there are tools to help with this. There's a Helm 2 to 3 plugin to guide users through this process. There's a section in the docs specifically for upgrading from Helm 2 to 3. At helm.sh/docs. So it's definitely findable, but there was if this were happening tomorrow, I would announce it, but now I'm mainly just noting the fact that this happened, primarily to emphasize its importance, as well as there will be information about that workshop made available too, for people that missed it.
Can you share a little bit of why we actually need a workshop for this? Like, are the changes that big? Is it really hard? Why do we need the whole workshop? Can I just like click update and that's it?
Yes and no. So the major change, I would say that it is a pretty nice user experience to update, given the scope of how people use Helm. And how major the architectural changes were between Helm 2 and Helm 3. It's very nice. The Helm 2 to 3 plugin has specific commands to guide you to doing what you need to do, allowing you to manually review those changes and then make sure everything's up to snuff, redirect your traffic to the correct, to your correct service, or there are in-place upgrade options. There's really just different ways of doing it. So I don't want to necessarily repeat all of what's in the docs, but I could just give a tiny taste in short of the different options, and then I could kind of emphasize to you why.
Can we start? Can we start? You mentioned big architectural changes. Can you tell us a little bit of what is this underlying structure that was changed and why?
Yes. So the biggest change that most people are aware of is that when Helm was first written, it was in line with current best practices for applications running on Kubernetes. Those best practices have changed over time. Helm just turned 5 years old on Monday. So in the world of Kubernetes, it's basically kind of an ancient relic. So how it operated was there was basically a daemon running on the server, in your cluster that could be installed in one of several different ways. But the most popular way was to just have full privileged access. That daemon just had full privileged access to do things to your Kubernetes cluster on your behalf. So
let me just ask you a question here. So that daemon's called Tiller, right?
That's correct.
And when you said the privileged access, is that why my security friends love Tiller so much?
Yes, it is. Yes, and so exactly, and so that's a default. That's a common default installation, but that's not how it must be installed. That's just, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. And so depending on your cluster team and access topology, it's a perfectly fine way to do it. But depending on that, it's not, right? And there was an issue over time where this is sort of old news now, but where Tiller's default ports that it listened to were just open. So the recommended way in the documentation and in installation instructions became to lock that down in one of several ways. And many people did, and many people haven't. Based on giving some KubeCon talks and just sort of taking the temperature of the audience, which I usually like to do just for fun, there are quite a few hands that went up of people who were happy to admit that they had been running this in production without any of those lockdown mechanisms.
Sounds like a true Halloween story.
It does. It really does. So basically, yes. So yes, Tiller going away was huge news for everyone. Helm 3 that had been worked on for quite a while and is the current version of Helm, and has been for almost a year now. Completely changes that. There is no daemon running in the system. It just uses Kubernetes RBAC. So there's a couple of talks on. There are a whole bunch of talks on this, but there's some I can recommend that are really awesome, and one I can recommend that's at the very least pretty awesome because I had an awesome co-presenter, Paul Czakowski, and I guess I was okay in it, and we talked about hacking Helm and the great ways and non-great ways to do that and how to protect against those. So I mean, people can check that out if they want specific details. I'd take up this whole session with just that if I got into that stuff. But that's the major change, is that you're essentially running the client that has no more privileged access than if you were running kubectl.
Okay, cool. All right, so if people want to learn about, if they missed the workshop and they want to learn some more about how to do this migration, what you said is that on helm.sh, we got tons of documentation on how to do that.
Yep, that's right. And also feel free to reach out to me personally as well, on Slack or Twitter or any of all the things. And the team that I think is really the heroes in the 2.3 plugin. I did not work in the 2.3 plugin. Other people did, and they're fantastic resources and usually very happy to answer questions too.
Cool. All right. So next points we have on the agenda. Helm 2 support comes to an end on Friday, 13th November.
Very Halloween.
Yeah, very Halloween-ish.
Not in October, but it's Friday the 13th at least.
And then you said here that Google's sponsorship of the official Helm chart is coming to a close when Helm 2 support ends, and GitHub is picking up the baton. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is really the big news. So,
Mm-hmm.
so anyone following this knows that there is a stated deprecation timeline for Helm 2. It's been blogged about, talked about, posted about. Has it been communicated enough? I don't think it can be communicated enough. So no, there's a continued effort to try to make sure to help users here, because we realize that users, they're not always following the communication channels of all the technology that we're using. You've got other more important things to do, like running your applications, running your business, and whatever else. The other reasons you wanted to use Kubernetes to help you get there in the first place, and Helm to help you manage that. So yeah, but for those who have been following know that for the last almost year, and it will be a full year on the 13th of November, Helm 2 will be officially end of life, officially unsupported, and the official charts repo will also be unsupported, in the sense that it will. This has now been fully clarified that it will be archived.
Mm-hmm.
It will be read-only. No more development will be done there. However, the big news is that chart package history will be still available, rather than through the Google object storage buckets, as they have, yes, generously donated for all of these years. That will be coming to a close, and we have instead moved to hosting that information, those packages on GitHub pages. GitHub they are well aware of the incredibly high traffic from this. It's very high, I would say that. And so but GitHub's, they have a pretty good infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
so they have.
I certainly hope they do.
Yeah. So they've essentially sponsored by lifting specific caps so that users won't be punished for the high traffic.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I'm living under a rock. I have better stuff to do. I have code to write. I don't care about this new version because new things are always annoying. What's going to happen to my system on Friday 13th?
Well, a few things. I definitely don't want to steal Matt Farina's thunder with his blog post that's coming out. The very first thing I should say is there is a blog post coming out to tell you exactly the specific commands that you have to run to update your Helm repo if you're using the stable or incubator repos, which exact new versions that you can update to. But it's perfectly fine to say because it was also announced on the Helm dev call. So I'm not revealing something big here. But yes, there will be the new versions of both Helm 2 and Helm 3 will help users to automatically detect if they have the old repo URLs and to help them update those.
Are things just going to stop working? Like it gives me a warning, but does it stop working? How's that going to happen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and if you do nothing, yes, it will stop working at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
Just like if you had, I don't know, say Yarn. If you used Yarn to manage node packages and a node package changes location, you have to do something about that. This happens all the time in distributed systems. So I don't think that this is really a kind of a Helm apocalypse situation at all. It's, it's more like,
It will certainly be a fun day on Twitter, though.
Yes. Yes, it will. Yeah, it will be more like users who haven't received the memo may say, wait, what? And so Vic Iglesias from Google, who's also a Helm maintainer, is helping with a neat trick on the Helm, on the charts repo side, where it's perfectly fine to modify the URL in the Helm repo index. So what we can do is change that URL to a special chart that gives a very nice warning message instead of just simply a 404. So that is the goal, the GitHub issue to track that inside of the charts repo. There's also a GitHub repo to track all of the other efforts I mentioned. Excuse me, there's a Git issue to track all of the other issues I mentioned.
So you mentioned a post by Matt Farina. So there's the Cube Weekly newsletter. There's one going out tomorrow, and I added a link there for this article by Matt Butcher and Matt Farina, and it's called Helm Turns 5 and GitHub Gives the Gift of Charts. This is not the blog post you were just talking about, right?
It's not. It's one of them. It's kind of the big, like, yay, it turned Helm is 5 now, and revealed that GitHub's, this big news that GitHub has really kind of taken the baton to sponsor the project in that way, which is it's fantastic news for end users. It really is. I think they're both wise to do that and generous to do that. But there's a follow-up post with more details about exactly the commands that you must run and which versions that you will want to upgrade to. You won't actually need to refer to that post. It will be pretty clear, I think, just in looking at the next Helm versions. But it'll just help users kind of walk step by step.
Cool. All right. So what else do we have in the agenda? We talked about the blog post. You just finished doing the work of moving all that stuff to GitHub. That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that too, or I will mention that. Yes, that work has been done. So it was fun. I wrote just a small tool, essentially a script. I often, do that. I think a lot of people write their scripts in Go all the time. I usually don't. I usually write mine in POSIX shell, and then as soon as I know what the actual requirements of it are, I convert it to Go so it's maintainable. But in this, it hasn't really made it there because it doesn't really need to go there. This is fairly short-lived. It's pretty straightforward. It's just I can send a link to it, but it's in my GitHub. It's called Helm Adopt package history, and you basically just run it, give it parameters, and it will automatically download all of the packages that are listed in a Helm repo for you. Update your index in the way it must be done. Give you some options for subdirectory and so on. Some people do like that. We actually wanted to do that to make it more maintainable for the stable and incubator repos, because there are hundreds and hundreds of charts and many thousands of combined versions of the packages for those charts.
So who is the user for this tool? Is it like if I have a Helm 2 chart and I'm worried about this transition, I can use this tool to help me migrate stuff over from Google to GitHub?
Yeah, so there's a, well, yes and no. So so Helm, I think here's the easy way to describe for people who don't, I realize you know this, but for people who don't know this, a Helm repo consists of one or more charts. We'll just sort of keep it fairly straightforward. And a chart is really almost nothing more than a collection of Kubernetes resource YAML manifests. Helm does specific things to that for you. It allows kind of a very sophisticated version of parameter expansion. That's really how the templating started. It uses Go templating for that. It's one of the things that some people that prefer more structured syntax don't like, because you can get charts that become kind of wildly messy, where you have lots of kind of basically like if-else tree hell and just many different, basically every different edge case imaginable stuffed inside of these charts that just turn into spaghetti code. So I'll actually talk about that at the end, about a cool new feature in Helm that allows you to bypass all of that stuff. But basically, that's what it does. It allows a team to pass configurations to sets of Kubernetes manifests. And what Helm does ultimately is introduces a new concept to your deployments called a release. And that's really all it does. It uses just labels and annotations, ultimately to combine those releases into something that Helm recognizes that it owns, and it allows you to interact with it in that way, as opposed to you having to manage it all yourself. The templating helps you to not have to accidentally have typos of the same types of configurations that you paste 5,000 times throughout your YAML. So that's kind of the short version of one of the big things Helm does for end users. I realize this is almost like an intro to Helm sentence or paragraph, but that's pretty much what it does. And I'm only mentioning that because if you don't really know what a Helm repo is, then you might not know even what a chart is, and that's essentially what a chart is. There's way more to learn about it, but that just gives users who are familiar with Kubernetes, but not necessarily Helm and Helm repos, a decent idea. This podcast is probably for people who are using Helm, but just might not know all the things about it. It might just have something that says Helm install stable WordPress, and then that's all they knew they did. So what that really means is that stable prefix is the name of your Helm repository. And the Helm repositories have been hosted on GitHub, the actual source code, but the packages for those repositories have been hosted in an object storage bucket.
Cool.
This time, and that's really the short end of it. I would say, actually, what was the question? I just realized I forgot what the ultimate point of that was.
Yeah, Jesus, what was the question?
was it about what users need to know?
Oh, no, the question was that this tool that you created to make this transition from a Google object to the same thing on GitHub, the question was basically who needs to use this tool?
I see. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, so the only people that need to use that tool are people who want to help maintain charts and chart repositories. That's it. So cool. In the stable repo, there is a GitHub issue that's pinned to the top of the issue queue about relocating stable charts. It's a pretty good percentage of the way through, but it's not all done, and it will not be done by the 13th of November. So for those charts that have not moved to new GitHub organizations or homes, many have, and most of the most widely used ones are moved already, but a number have not yet, and they still need to be adopted. So this is one of the several tools that can help users adopt these charts. This tool will help adopt the package history. Luckily, you may never have to worry about that with the stable and incubator repos, because now we've actually used this tool on the same repository that since GitHub is now hosting it, the package history will always remain there. It's already automated, so every new chart until the 13th of November will be there, and after that point, it will just be our read-only. But if you want, there are many other Helm repos because we've now moved to distributed model. So if you want to adopt a chart that's then been deprecated somewhere, move it somewhere else, or even, actually that's probably the only use case at this point. Okay. Then you probably bring the package history along too, because you may not trust that its source will maintain that correctly.
Cool. All right, let's see what else we have here. So our list of topics says how users can upgrade from Helm 2 to Helm 3. I think we talked about this a bunch, right? Let's skip this one.
Yes.
How users will interact with distributed chart repos. And the secret answer is?
Yes, the Cncf Artifact Hub. So this is a Cncf project. It was initially kind of the child of Dan Cone, and ultimately there are a number of different aggregation hubs, search and aggregation hubs. The operator hub, there is Bitnami's charts hub. There's Monocular, on which it's based, and then there was the Helm hub. There are various other artifact aggregation tools out there, and so the idea is, well, if these are all projects under CNCF, why can't there just be a single CNCF hub to aggregate and point to artifacts that are distributed? It's really a community problem that it solves.
But how does it work? Like, let's say I have no idea about Helm, and I was using Helm the old way, and now it's like, oh, I just stumbled upon this term, distributed chart. What the hell is that?
Right. So I think you're describing an end, let's say an end user who really makes use of charts but doesn't really contribute to them necessarily.
Yeah.
Maybe they will if they continue to use them more and more. That's how most people start getting involved.
Yeah.
But you're not really talking about maintainers.
No, from the point of view of a user, like I use Helm and I have those charts that I like, and now people are talking about distributed charts. How does that change my life?
Oh. Yeah. So basically, exactly. So the short answer is you'll go to artifacthub.io and type in the search box for what you want, and you'll see the list.
Is this live?
It's live. Yes, it's been live for a while.
Let's take a look at it.
Yeah, it is actually still in. I believe it's still in. It's in beta now. I think it should say beta at the very top.
Oh yeah, it's beta.
Yeah. Yes. So it's an open source project. It's a CNCF project.
Okay, I want to install WordPress on my Kubernetes. So let's see what happens here.
Yep. So you get information. You can click.
And that's all I need basically.
Yep. You can also click the install button on the right, and there will be additional, or it's not really a button, but a pop-up, that little install pop-up blue link, and there's additional information. You can close that if you want and click the more link down below, and let's see. Yeah.
So it seems like it's the same thing for Helm 2 and Helm 3. So I'm having trouble understanding what changed here.
Slightly different. They're slightly different. If you click below the installation, there's very slightly different syntax, and that's because it was a major version, and so some of the old syntax that didn't make sense, that was an opportunity to update it. Yeah. There's an overview of changes between Helm 2 and Helm 3 in the docs too.
But if I can use, so this chart is hosted at Bitnami. So I assume this is what we mean with distributed charts, the fact that they're hosted anywhere. But
correct. And if you click the back button a few times, you'd see that there were a number of different packages. There we go. So there's packages hosted by different people, and so far you've clicked on only Helm charts, but there are also OLM operators, Falco rules, and other. Actually, there are other packages. Maybe not that many for WordPress, but if you did just like say a search without the word WordPress.
But my question is, if on Helm 2 I can use charts that are in many places, how is distributed charts a new thing for Helm 3?
It is not a new thing for Helm 3. It is just now the official charts repository, the official Helm charts repository is ending. Support for that ends on the same day that support for Helm.
Okay, so basically before this was optional and I could just use the default repo, and now I have to specify where my chart is. Is that the change?
You could have done that before. That's correct. You could have added an additional repository before.
But now I have to.
That's now you will have to in order to make use of Helm.
Got it. Cool. All right. Let me go back to the regular camera setup here. Okay. Yeah. At least I understand now the answer to that question that started off as a hypothetical question, but I actually got lost in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think Helm Hub Artifact Hub is a really cool tool to explore. It's maintained by really dedicated maintainers who are pretty diligent about doing it correctly. You can also check out for people who are interested, you can check out the repo on GitHub, Artifact Hub/hub.
So you said Helm Hub and then you corrected yourself and you said Artifact Hub. Does that mean that we have more than just Helm stuff now on the hub?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So on Artifact, so what I think you're alluding to is that there was a thing called Helm Hub, and we have migrated from Helm Hub to Artifact Hub. There are also other types of packages on Artifact Hub, other types of cloud native packages that are not Helm packages. So some of the examples were Falco rules, there are OLM operators, there are Helm charts. The goal is for other types of packages to be supported there. And that's on an as-needed basis, and it's open to, and it's an open source project. So I can certainly imagine, and I was considering even for fun writing a support for customized packages.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah. And the thing is, in a way, it seems kind of silly because Customize is all about customizing for yourself in a way, or customizing for your team. And so why would you share them? But there are things that are shareable. There are at least bases or certain resources, customized resources that are widely used in documentation, etc. So that would be great.
That is an interesting question. So I published a video, I think a month ago, where I was comparing Helm and Customize. And the general advice I gave there was, if you're just customizing stuff for yourself or for a small team, you should just use Customize because it's easier. If you want to publish your stuff so that a lot of other people can use it, then you're probably better off using Helm because it's fancier. What you're saying is that that's not necessarily the case. A lot of people share their customized stuff, right?
Yeah, and the inverse is also true. Many people use, and I think it's wise in many cases to use Helm for very, very specific as well as simple use cases too.
Can you share under what circumstances it is best to publish a customized chart as opposed to a Helm chart?
Yes, I think Customize is it's kind of all in the name. If you want to highly customize things for your own use cases, I think Customize is a fantastic option for that. People often ask a similar question about operators or controllers. When's it good to use, let's say, even for now, just to keep it simple, let's say a controller versus a Helm chart. When is it good to use one or the other? And one way of answering that is that it really just depends on your use case. If you want to do something highly customized, an operator is a fantastic choice because you can code anything you want into it. You don't really have to update a chart and its templates in order to do so. You can have specific logic that you couldn't easily add to even a template, even the most complex templates. You can't do this. It's not going to be as robust as writing code and go. There's just not going to be. So you can do more if you have to do more. On the other hand, it comes with a higher maintenance cost, depending, and you don't get to take advantage of a lot of the work that others have done for you necessarily. So that's where Helm charts can come in really handy. The other thing to mention there is that I'm mentioning controllers in the question that, as you asked about Customize, but I'll get back to Customize in a second because it's very similar. You can use Helm charts to install controllers or operators and vice versa. So they really can play well together, and there are a number of different projects that recommend that. And I think if you know what you're doing and if it fits your use case, it is a good option. Customize is similar in that it can interact with Helm now as of Helm 3.1.0. Helm, that's actually my favorite feature in Helm. Right now, I guess I'm just sort of obsessed with it, even though in a sense it's kind of a hack. There is a flag called post renderer, and by hack all I mean is you can do almost anything with it. What it does is it accepts. It allows you to do the thing you used to be able to do with Helm, where you just use Helm template to spit out templates, and then you can apply those with kubectl apply, or you could use Customize to apply them if you wanted to do that. The thing that you missed with that method is you didn't get the concept of a release that Helm offers, and you don't get rollbacks or versioning or rollbacks or any of the other release management tools that people rely on Helm for. So as of the post renderer flag, as of v3.1.0, it allows you to provide an executable as a post renderer the executable could be customized, for example. And there's a demo, the demo linked from the Helm docs, which describes the post render, has a link to Taylor Thomas's customized post render demo. So people can just visit that, check it out. And it's a really good short demo. Paul Tchaikovsky did one with YTT. There's that you can use almost anything. You could use just simply a bash or just any kind of a script. And all you really need to do for a post render is accept Kubernetes templates on standard input, do whatever you want to them, and then it listens for your standard output. And that's really it. So you can completely change resource types, completely remove them, make small alterations, but it's great for things that people used to stuff into charts logic, or maybe not just used to, but currently still do, unfortunately, which is adding, let's say you want additional environment variables in a pod, or in containers in a pod. Let's say you want, different kinds of mounts, volume mounts, or you want init containers, or you want, you want a PDB, where it wasn't templated into the chart, or you want to set OPA policies. You would have to template that into each chart in order to do that properly if you didn't use one of those other techniques that kept you from using the full power of Helm. So now with this, you can do that and still have charts that are extremely simple, where their only purpose is to allow you to configure the kinds of options that you should be configuring in order to run that application in Kubernetes. That's the huge difference. And for me, that's the big value of that feature.
So basically, it's like that meme where I heard you like templating. So now you have a post render, so you can template while you template on top of your templates.
Well, kind of, yes. So you don't have to use it, but what it allows you to do, it allows you to have a really simple version of a chart without all of that garbage inside of it, without lifting up the floorboards and saying, "Mother of God, what is this?" It can just be very straightforward. Only as complex as the application requires to run in Kubernetes. It doesn't have to include every other possible option for doing anything you would want with it that Kubernetes allows. That's something that I think Kustomize is a really great choice for. But I think it's a really great choice combined with Helm, in my opinion, because if you were to use Kustomize for that entirely, you'd really be managing a whole lot more yourself.
Cool.
I think.
All right. You raised a point that made me. So yesterday I gave a talk for an O'Reilly event, and it's about. So my point was that when you don't give tools to your developers, it's like they're using notepads to use Kubernetes instead of an IDE, for example, and that's bad because it makes people sad and it's not a good developer experience. And then I was telling them about, all the tons of tools that are there. And then I talked about Helm, about Kustomize, local clusters, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end, someone asked me, when should you use Helm instead of an operator? And I was like, what? They're different things. You can use Helm to install your operator, but Helm is one thing, operators are another thing. What situation are you in where you have that question? Should I use Helm or an operator? I don't understand. So it's interesting you brought this up. So apparently people have been doing a lot more stuff with templates than they ever should, right?
I would say many people think that, and I also think that. I would say there's no real objective way to answer that question. It's really more of a matter of opinion, and you can put it through the filters of, whether it's just a smell test for whether your code smells correct, whether it is simple enough, or whether it's the simplest solution to achieve your goal or not. That can be something that teams can use to decide whether or not they're doing it right, or doing themselves a favor, rather. But I think that, to be fair, the reason people have done that is because there is such a tremendous value in Helm's release management capabilities. And and adding your logic into a chart, whether you forked it yourself or whether you're contributing that upstream somewhere, that was the only way to maintain that benefit without just spitting out templates and then just using it as templates, using it purely as a templating engine. Yeah. So I think that's why, while I'm acknowledging that it isn't, it's not highly locked down, the post render is still secure in the sense that nothing is going to post render for you without your permission. You have to explicitly define a specific executable, and there are some restrictions. It just means that you do have a lot more freedom to use any other tools in combination with Helm in order to still get that release management benefit.
Cool.
Yeah, and so I know you were asking about operators, but I think your real question to me, or mentioned operators, but your real question to me was about, are people using templates to do too much, right? And I think that's what I was trying to respond to.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's see what else we have here. New things in the Helm ecosystem. The Flux 2 Helm controller. I have sorry, I have zero clue what this is. Can you enlighten us?
Sure. Just in short, I mentioned that I work at Weaveworks, and because I wanted to get into GitOps, and there are different tools for doing GitOps. I know that Weaveworks coined that, but that's not really why I was most interested in Flux. Sorry, coined the GitOps term, but that's not why I was most interested in Flux. I was mostly interested because as I was looking at the various options, it seemed like the most well-architected one, in my opinion. So I wanted to get into it further. It also focused on it integrated with different tools, including Helm. So
let me just stop you here for a second. Can you give us 20 seconds, explain it like I'm five, intro to what is Flux?
Yes, yeah. Flux is a continuous and progressive delivery system for GitOps. It is a set of tools that you run in your cluster that at least in Flux 2, which anyone interested should check out, because that's really where all development is going now. It's the Cncf Sandbox. It's a Cncf Sandbox soon-to-be incubator project that that allows you to define custom resource definitions for how GitOps is supposed to work. So it allows you to define a source code repository, or a storage bucket for users who are in a different sort of regional type situation, and want to have a workflow between their source code repository and an object storage bucket like S3 or whatever. But ultimately, the idea, the concept there is that you are defining your intended, your desired result in code. It's versioned, and you're not just calling imperative commands to your cluster. You are versioning your declarations, and you are telling a tool in your cluster to listen for those declarations. You can also set up webhooks so that when you make a push, it goes faster. But you can say, essentially, watch what I'm doing in my code repository, and what I define should happen in that cluster, and then build on top of Kubernetes' superior reconciliation engine that already exists to continue to try to make that happen until it does, and to have, to make sure that observability is clear there, that you know what's going on if something went wrong. And basically, it's sort of, it is kind of the operator move. In fact, the older Flux 1 came with a Helm operator, and ultimately it was relatively monolithic, a number of different components, and that's all been broken out into more componentized controllers and easier to maintain controllers, so that people can work on each piece without having to worry about disrupting the entire monolith. So it's really just it's re-architected to help speed up development and just make it more stable moving forward.
And what has changed from the initial version of Flux to Flux 2?
I almost want to plead the fifth there. I know of a number of different changes, but I don't know that I'm super well equipped to explain them all in depth right now, or I don't know if we have time. But I'm a very new team member there. I've been working on certain things, but primarily so far working on helping with users with the migration from V1 to V2, really getting into that mode and helping with the project as an open source project. So working on the governance doc, for example, and other things that are necessary for this to be a project that's not just donated by a company and continue to run by that same company, but something that's really owned by a broader user base.
Yeah, that can be very tricky to do well. Let's take a look at we have a couple comments. So Kleber says hi. Hi, Kleber. And Ton asks, what is your friend code for Animal Crossing? And thanks for Helm, I love it.
Awesome.
Do you want to talk about your Animal Crossing adventures? I know nothing about that game.
Sure. Do you have a place where you can put links and stuff afterwards? I guess in the blog or whatever.
Yeah, we can put it in the comments.
Yeah, I was gonna say because I'd have to bust out my Switch and yeah, I'll give my friend code, absolutely. I'm not on there all the time these days, but I got into Animal Crossing because my daughter lives in, I'm a father, and my 13-year-old daughter lives outside of Philly for part of the year. And while she's there, this was a way for us to hang out and go fishing and harvest fruit and
that's so cute.
Dig fossils and assess the fossils and build out our museum and collect bugs and all the cool things that you can do in Animal Crossing.
That is so cool. I'm learning about what this game is because I had no idea.
My one sentence version of the game is it is a game to allow you to escape the complexities of life for a short time and do mindless busy work, while the whole structure of the game is a capitalist model where you're basically paying rent to raccoons and you're essentially just doing kind of like historically women's busy work, but also just straight up busy work as you endlessly make insignificant improvements and continue to pay someone else money.
It sounds way too much like real life, man.
Yeah, but it's such calming music, and it's so not obvious. That part is so not obvious that it's, if you just decide that this is a fun game that you can just chill out in, you can chill out. That's my 2 cents, but I think diehard fans of Animal Crossing might love me or hate me for that. I don't know.
Okay, we have a few more comments. Let me move us there. Ton says, awesome. What I most struggle with is finding a good and fast development flow for Kubernetes and the project setup. Ton, I think you need to go to dax.dev and look at all our videos, because that's kind of what we do. And then reach out to the Tilt team as well, because yeah, that's the stuff we like helping people with. Someone whose name I'm not going to dare to try and pronounce.
Oh, that's Hida.
Okay.
Hida's is I don't know about primary maintainer, but basically one of the main maintainers of the Helm operator and the Helm controller in Flux. So his opinion here, I don't know if you just clarified something that I said, or yeah, exactly. It has moved from a monolithic operator to a modular composable set of components. That's totally right. So it's like a shorter version of what I was trying to say earlier.
It sounds to me like, Hida, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like it's more of an under the hood change than a user-facing change. And I suppose that's then a good foundation for more functionality in the future, right? All right. So, Scott, I have a trick question for you. Let me get the
Okay.
cameras here. So, the last time we talked,
Prize?
huh?
Do I get a prize if I?
We can arrange a prize.
Okay.
The last time we talked, you alluded very briefly to Helm Exploits, and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing I should say, just so I don't scare people by saying that, is that one of the things that was so helpful about the Helm 3 process is that through working with CNCF, there were very focused security reviews, not just like, I mean, pen tests and just really very, very thorough security reviews. And Helm 3, there were a few things found, they were disclosed and fixed, but Helm 3 is certainly past that, and it continues to. And also later versions of Helm 2 as well. But there are still exploits. So for example, the easiest one to mention is what I said before about how Tiller is a daemon. Essentially, we can call it a daemon. I'm just sort of saying that for general purpose discussion. Running in your cluster, if it's installed with just with cluster admin access, and you have RBAC set up for your teams, and you give your team member access to Tiller, well, then you've essentially granted privilege escalation immediately. You know, there are ways to mitigate that, but without knowing what those are, you've just escalated that privilege unknowingly, possibly. So, and that actually is pretty common. So one of the ways that you can defend against that in Helm 2, which also maybe plug your ears because Helm 2 is going away very quickly. But the way to do that would be to install multiple instances of Helm, you know, and just don't grant it cluster admin access. You know, grant it the same RBAC that you would expect users who have access to that instance of Helm to have. There are other things. You know, older versions of Helm didn't always check for. You know, there are later versions of Helm too that that do greater checks for you. I mean, for example, there are 5 different ways of installing a chart. If you do a Helm install help or -h, you can see them. They're just listed at the top, and one of those is by alias. And if the user's not, this is really not something that's a big. I'm actually not disclosing anything by saying these things. They're all like pretty old and long since known. But for those that aren't following, or maybe just didn't update for a long time now, you could be pointing to an alias that, or excuse me, installing with an alias where someone else had, let's say, essentially declared that alias to be a completely different Helm repo. So almost a kind of a man-in-the-middle attack there, or at least that kind of concept where you're not aware that you're installing from a different set of instructions than you think you are. So very similar to kind of you know, pipe shell.
But what kind of permissions do you need to change that alias?
Well, so luckily repo information is stored with the client, so stored locally. So someone would need access to your to whatever workspace you're using.
And I suppose by the time someone has access to that, you're screwed anyway.
Pretty much, yeah, okay. Yeah, pretty much. So that's not a huge disclosure, but it is something for people to note because there are shared workspace concepts, and I mean, it could just be as simple as a teammate pulling a prank on you to something worse.
And I suppose Bitcoin always comes to mind.
always comes to mind. So there's that. There's the naughty chart maintainer effect, where there's someone who you trust because they're a chart maintainer, but all that really means is there's someone in the community that contributed enough to a specific chart in order to be granted maintainer access, and then they could, without necessarily someone else noticing, craft that chart in order to do naughty things in your cluster.
Have we seen this in the wild?
Yes. There were instances.
How did it go?
They get cleaned up. It gets cleaned up. So for example, charts testing infrastructure had some instances of mining. And I think it also has to do with how you set up your CI. So if you set up your CI to not do in-depth checks of what you're running, it doesn't matter if it's Helm or something else. Someone could open a pull request or whatever else your CI is triggered on and enact certain actions on your testing infrastructure. Some systems, some users' testing infrastructure is in the same cluster as their production, for example. So there, you know what I mean? There is a lot of weirdness and a lot of room for just bad practices that can lead to exploits. But later versions of Helm makes that harder, whereas earlier versions of Helm doesn't make it harder. Sorry, that makes it easier.
One of the things that I like is to take old vulnerabilities and just see how to exploit them, even if they're not current anymore. It's just fun. So I think at some point in the future I'm gonna take Helm 2 for a spin and see all the naughty things that we can find there. I really like this. I find funny like this Bitcoin stuff because I worked at a big data company for a while, and we would set up these humongous clusters. And sometimes, we're in a hurry, it's a government contract, et cetera. And well, I suppose the person who was supposed to configure things didn't configure things correctly. And it's like we would get in the office at Monday morning and there would be complaints that everything went down in flames over the weekend. And then we would find, oh yeah, okay, we're mining a shit ton of Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. And our bill just went up significantly.
Oh, that doesn't matter. It's government money.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's especially important. I know this is really getting like way out, really kind of into outlying territory here, but just as a fun example, if someone has their infrastructure set up with cluster autoscaler.
Yeah.
What
could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Yeah, but I mean, of course, like ways to mitigate that would be to spin up dedicated clusters for specific runs even, or specific tasks, and spin them down when you're done. In fact, maybe that's a good thing that we were talking about. One of the things that Flux can do is Flux works with Cluster API now, and there are demos on how.
Speaking of Flux, we have another comment.
Right.
Hida says Flux has moved to a declarative first approach by making most things configurable using CRGs, so it is a UX thing too. Yeah, that's really cool. I like this.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, we should talk about user experience as part of the process. Yeah, of using GitOps of whatever kind, but in this case, just I'm focusing on Flux, of course. But yeah, so there's demos of how to use a controlling cluster using Flux with CAPI or Cluster API to allow that controlling cluster to spin up additional clusters, and that can be super valuable for things whether we're talking about clusters at the edge and that kind of conversation, or whether we're talking about CI like you and I were just talking about. There are ways, whether we use that process, I just thought I would mention it because it's a possible, you can do that now. But whether you use that process or you're not using GitOps at all, and you use some other type of CI system to spin up your clusters, that's another way that users can mitigate those kinds of risks.
Yeah. All right. We're closing on an hour now, so I think we should start wrapping this up. Do you have any last thoughts, or is there cool stuff you're working on that you want to share, how people can check it out?
Yeah, the one thing I wanted to mention that I didn't was in the conversation about adopting Helm repos and this effort to move widely used but heavily maintained charts from the official Helm charts repo to new homes. The Helm team and the Helm charts team have created a set of tools to help you do that, including we were just talking about testing, but including a Go project called chart testing. It allows you to do some pretty robust testing. It's very widely used. It's used in the official charts infrastructure, but we also have created a GitHub Action to wrap it. So for those who are on GitHub, you can use that there. In a repo that you set up, there's a demo repo in the Helm repo for GitHub Action, for the chart GitHub Actions, that can just show you how to emulate that same working demo, but for your charts repo. We've been doing this with different organizations. We work with the Prometheus community, with Jenkins, the Jenkins team, with the Grafana folks, with many different people. Have been collaborating with the Apache Software Foundation, but things tend to move pretty slowly there, so that won't happen before the 13th. But there are tools, is what I'm really trying to say, to help you do that. And there's another tool that I should mention in the same sentence as we're closing out, called Chart Releaser, that is also specific. This one is specific to GitHub. It basically allows you to host just a chart index on GitHub pages. But instead of dumping all of those packages into GitHub pages, it creates GitHub releases and attaches your chart packages as artifacts to those releases.
Oh, that's cool.
The big benefit of that is, I mean, as you know, but as some people listening may or may not be thinking about, that also allows you to get download stats and other type of statistics through the GitHub API, like you would on any release artifact. So that's a really big benefit, and we have a GitHub Action for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cool. Thanks a bunch for coming, Scott. Thanks for joining us and sharing all this cool stuff. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Sorry? Go ahead.
Ella, it was great to see you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And hope to talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone, for joining. And, well, we're wrapping up this episode now. You can see the recording later if you want to review some bits of it. We're probably going to share some links in the comments as well. And we also just published a new video on dex.dev about how to choose local development clusters. So if you haven't checked it out yet, take a look. And thanks a bunch, folks. See you next time. Bye.